Good evening, friends and family of Grace Lutheran Church. This Sunday is the last Sunday of the church year at Grace, and I have to admit that our hymn video for this week is going to be not so much about the hymn, but more about kind of our whole service for this week. The theme of our liturgy, of all of the things that we're going to speak and do in our service this week, is in putting our trust on the promises of God, not on what appears to be true or what we perceive to be the case in this world. And this theme of trusting the promises of God rather than what we see is something that we see in all of our readings for this week, but I especially want to focus on our gospel reading from Luke. Our gospel reading is Luke 23, verses 27 to 43. And I just kind of want to skip to the end of this passage, but Pastor is going to be handling the beginning of the passage in his sermon for this week. So I encourage you all to show up to church so you can hear that. And if you're not local and you can't be here, you can check out Pastor's sermon, which will be posted in our Facebook page, a link to that audio file. So, sorry for the little ad there, but I want to focus on where we see that theme of the trusting what God says rather than what the world shows us at the end of our reading for this week. This passage from Luke starts with Jesus being led to the cross, and it takes us through Luke's account of the crucifixion up until the actual death of Jesus, which is not included in our reading for this week. And what you might guess by looking at the front of our bulletin for this week, it contains the story of Jesus conversing with the two criminals on the cross. Now, in this story, as we all know, the story of Jesus' crucifixion, Jesus has just been issued a death sentence that he does not deserve. He is hung on a cross. He is humiliated. He is mocked for calling himself the Son of God and yet not being able to save himself. And to these enemies of Jesus that are standing around the cross, mocking him, to the world, and even to people who read this passage today, to anyone who reads it without the eyes of faith, it looks like this is an account about Jesus losing. And not just losing, but losing big time. I mean, losing his life. All of the evidence in this story points to Jesus being defeated. And yet, if we pay attention to Jesus himself in this story, and we listen to the words that he says, we see that the opposite is actually true. We especially see this in his words at the end of this passage to the thief on the cross. When the thief tells Jesus or asks Jesus to remember him when Jesus comes into his kingdom, what does Jesus say to that criminal? He says, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Even when everything in this story, all of the evidence points to Jesus losing, Jesus gives the thief on the cross the promise of victory. To the world, it looks like Jesus has been defeated, but Christ has the victory. And as he tells the thief on the cross in this case, he has opened the door to paradise. This is most certainly true. Feels like a good time to insert that Lutheran phrase there at the end. But this promise of the door to paradise being opened to us is what we celebrate with our hymn of the day. Finally getting to our hymn of the day. Our hymn of the day for this week is "At the Lamb's High Feast We Sing." It's number 633 in the Lutheran Service Book. And this is an Easter hymn that celebrates the future marriage feast of the Lamb in his kingdom at the end of the age. But it also serves, you see in our hymnal, the section it's located in, it also serves as a Lord's Supper hymn as we celebrate this feast of the Lamb and his victory over sin and death. Every time we receive his body and his blood in our little celebrations of the feast in communion. Now, we are not celebrating Easter this week, that is true, and we are also not celebrating the Lord's Supper this week. This is the third Sunday, so no. well, whatever it is, right? We won't be having the Lord's Supper, but we are celebrating Jesus' body and blood shed for us on the cross to win us a victory over sin and death when everything else shows us the contrary is true. Um, no matter what the world would have us believe, the focus of our service for this week is on the fact that we can trust God's promises to be true. The connection here, one of the very obvious connections here between our gospel reading for this week and our hymn of the day comes in verse 6 of the hymn. I'm going to read that for you now. Now no more can death appall, now no more the grave enthrall. You have opened paradise, and your saints in you shall rise. Alleluia. This is the promise that Jesus gives to the thief on the cross, and this is the promise that we celebrate this week in church. Now, this hymn has 8 verses, but it's actually going to be sung in 3 different places in our service. So we're splitting it up a little bit, singing a little bit at the beginning as our hymn of praise, and then a little bit as our hymn of the day before the sermon, and then again we're going to sing the last couple of verses for the offertory. So I look forward to singing this hymn with all of you this week. Like I said, if you're unable to be there, I encourage you to check out Pastor Wilsey's sermon, which will be posted on our Facebook page. And I hope you all have a very blessed last Sunday in the church year, and that you have a wonderful beginning to your Advent season as we look forward to Christ coming not only as a baby, but also Christ's second coming at the end. Thanks be to God. We'll see you Sunday.